Millions of frontline workers keep our economy running and are provided with the latest technology to do their jobs. But digital adoption, especially by frontline workers, is really hard.
This is Frontline Innovators. We explore how to overcome challenges and achieve success when we empower our essential workers.
I'm Justin Lake.
And I'm Gene Signorini. Together, we speak with experts who are leading the way and driving digital transformation to the front line.
This podcast is sponsored by Skillful, on a mission to help frontline workers learn and use the technology needed to succeed in their jobs. Welcome to the Frontline Innovators podcast. This is Justin Lake, your host for today's episode. Today's guest has spent the majority of his career in the food and beverage business, where he's developed his skills in negotiation, business planning, operations, management, sales, and overall business transformation. Among his many other degrees, he earned a PhD in organizational leadership from University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, which we'll explore a bit later in the show. Welcome, Michael Langley. Hello, Michael.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to speak with you again.
I'm really excited to have you today. And I want to just get right into the conversation that you and I've had several times before. But what do you see as the biggest challenge facing deskless workers today?
It's really meeting them where they are, right? We have functional silos. You have a very varied group of people from an age profile, from a technology acceptance profile, from a change management. And we're trying to meet them where they are, meet their business needs, but solve business problems holistically. And that becomes a real challenge. And then, of course, you have all those other pieces of the puzzle that's coming at you, such as security and all those other things, which can hinder performance and application, those things. So be sure we have the right technology, the right methodology for change management, to make sure that we're meeting their needs, but meet them where they are in their place, and so that they say, this is what's in it for me. I understand how to use the functionality, I understand the technology, and it's making my business life, my work-life balance all better.
I love the focus on meeting them where they are. And I think that it makes me immediately think about the differences between what we would think about with frontline workers, traditionally deskless folks, those folks that aren't interacting with a desktop or laptop computer. What do you see? Do you notice distinct differences between how you're implementing technology in your environment that applies differently to the frontline workers versus those folks that work at headquarters?
Yeah, certainly. You really have to understand what they're doing and how they're trying to use the information. And it's one thing to understand how to navigate a tool. It's another thing to understand how it applies to the business world. And it's really easy at corporate. We say, well, this is why you use it. They click here, click there. But what does that mean to the end user? How is it going to help them in their daily life? How is it going to help them drive their business or whatever thing they're trying to accomplish? And so often we think about now how it impacts us, or how do we support it, versus how does it impact the end user?
I think that's a fantastic point. I've observed that most tech innovation is really driven from a need from somebody at headquarters. They need better information from the field. They need a way to disseminate better information out to the field. It always seems to be that the men and women in the field themselves are kind of an afterthought to what needs they may have as part of this transformation. Do you have any secret sauce about how you've gone to collect the requirements and feedback from the men and women in the field?
I think after a key learning where we didn't do it properly, one of the most recent big projects where we rolled out our new sales and delivery application, we added people to the project team, and I intentionally chose a diverse group of people that would use the application, from a very seasoned veteran to a very young employee who was a trainee, to somebody kind of in between. And so we want to be sure that we can meet people where they are. And we said, if we can create a solution that meets the needs of, they understand the business, and they all represent different places of life and technology acceptance and comfortability, right? Being very comfortable with that. And I think that made us largely successful, because we did have that. And it was designed around people that did that job versus, to our point earlier, what management may or may not believe they need, because we don't do that job every day.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. We've always said that you can't build technology for mobile from a conference room at headquarters. You have to go out and spend some time in the field to see a day in the life of those workers, or you're going to make assumptions that just don't play out in the real world, and miss out on some valuable feedback. So I love hearing that you've engaged some of the men and women from the field to bring them into the discussions about how you implement that technology. And that
Actually, we
actually,
went once. I'm sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
no, please go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so the key difference, instead of spending time just trying to document what they said, we actually made them part of the team, and they're actually on the support team to this day, is so that they can be more in touch with the end user. They're actually located in the field, even though they report to my organization. So they live and breathe it every day with the people. They understand the frustrations, what doesn't work well. In the past, using the waterfall methodology, we would bring the end user in, document, but you still can't capture all their use cases. You still don't know exactly all their frustrations. So if you have people that actually live and breathe it daily as part of your organizational structure, it certainly gains a lot of insight so that you make the right business decisions.
That's a fantastic point. And it's being able to include them in the team is a fantastic idea. And I hope others in the audience are listening to that, because you're absolutely right that just asking them for input but not including them deeper into the process is really only going to skim the surface. And so I love the way that you're incorporating them even into your organization to make sure that it becomes a part of the process, not just a task you check off, on a checklist throughout the project engagement.
Correct.
We talked about what you see facing the deskless workforce. I'd be curious if we were to go ask the deskless frontline workers in your ecosystem what they think is the biggest challenge they're facing today. What do you think some of them might say?
I think they would say the same thing using different words.
Okay.
Right? They'll say, this doesn't do what I need it to do for this reason. Because when we do design applications, we're trying to think holistically what a salesperson needs, what a driver needs, what a merchandiser may need. And so you're looking at that holistic viewpoint. And sometimes that may cost somebody something that they need in their specific area. So I think that's one of the issues. Some people may say that, again, you're trying to design it simply, and some of the people more technology savvy going, well, I really wish it would do this, this, and this, and this, because they embrace technology, they have a lot of intellectual curiosity, they want to do more, but holistically we're going, we need to keep the application as simple as possible, process simple as possible, so that the whole entire group will be more comfortable with it.
You mentioned a bunch of the factors that influence technology adoption. So the age of the workers and their technical proficiency, things like that. You think there are any myths that when you've gotten out to the field and when you've assembled this team that we should be busting right now based on feedback that you've seen from those frontline workers?
Yeah, I certainly don't think age is necessarily indicative of curiosity or aptitude or ability. So first people you say that, you think about, but you could have the same issue with a much younger person, never had the exposure. And so you kind of have to go open-minded and just try to say, okay, where are they, and how do you meet them where they are, and just look at them as individuals, which is tough. You're trying to roll out something that may impact 2,000 people. That's the reason why it's important to try to have diversity on your team, diversity on your feedback, so that you can try to hopefully create a solution that meets everybody's needs to the majority of the point that you can. And of course, there always be gaps, and always be people who want more or less, but that's the main goal.
So when you say meet them where they are, that doesn't mean just geographically from a location standpoint, but it also sounds like you mean where they are in terms of their technical proficiency, where they are in the comfort with their other job skills, right? All of those other things that come into making the profile of an individual.
And how they accept change. Are they willing to embrace change? They're willing to are they going to kind of stand back and wait? Or are they going to embrace it and actually try to find out more? So how do you help encourage them to lean in? So it really does take being very cognizant of your population, very cognizant of change management. And it all starts, I think, with having the right team and making sure that they are part of that decision point, part of the design, and part of the rollout. Because one thing you want to do is especially trying to have emerging leaders. And so when the rest of the field sees these individuals participate and go, hey, they get it, they understand, and then you have them actually do the knowledge transfer versus somebody from corporate or somebody from upper management saying, hey, this is how you use it. It builds a lot more respect and trustworthiness of the final solution when it's one of their own that they spent time with and know and respect.
In almost every technology deployment that I've seen for the front lines that has been successful, they have leveraged some form of what you just described, which was to solicit, or not really solicit, but to recruit, I should say, a few folks from the field. And oftentimes it's, one of the folks that'll have a tendency towards being more positive anyway and evangelize the positive, but also perhaps find a couple of those folks that are a little more reluctant to change and try to engage them proactively in the process so that when everybody goes back out to the field, you have a whole group of evangelists, both people that are disproportionately positive anyway, but also if you can convert a few of those, original naysayers and help them understand what is in it for them, it seems to really contribute to the overall success of those types of programs. So it's great to hear you use that as an example.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To your point, to have a couple of naysayers that finally embrace it, make them part of that process, and then of course their colleagues look at it, go, well, if they believe in it, then I'm going to believe in it. So it just drives synergy.
That's right. What part do you think when we think about the profile of the individual users themselves and how you just described, a profile of that worker in terms of their technical proficiency, their experience on the job, their adaptability or ability to, accept change? What part do you think anxiety and insecurity about their job and their performance inside the organization, how do you think that plays out in terms of their ability or comfort level with technology adoption?
Well, I think it absolutely plays a huge role. And I think back, and when I started my career very, very early on, about 30 some years ago, there was a group of people. When I started, telling my age a little bit, the technology was a ballpoint pen and paper, right? So, and then the first handheld was rolling out, and I remember at the time I worked for Coke, and there's like 7 people left and went to Pepsi and going, well, they don't have that technology, and not enough forethought to think, well, it's coming. Right. And so they left just because they were not comfortable. And so I think over time that's gone much better since technology has progressed and it's become much more simple and intuitive designs through iOS or Android or those things. And it's part of their everyday life. But there's still people have a fear of failure. Right. And just an anxiety about failure or anxiety about being embarrassed about, hey, I don't know how to do that. So I'm going to appear like I know how to do it. And then we'll go out in the field and then really not know how and make errors and et cetera versus. So it's absolutely part of it. Are they willing to ask the question, have confidence to ask a question and realize they're not being judged and because they don't know something.
I wish I could tell you that your story of people leaving the company to go to a competitor because of the potential of having to use technology. I wish I could tell you that was the first time I've heard that, but it's not. We continue to hear that today around, large scale mobile technology rollouts where people, they know that they will have some amount of attrition just because of the announcement of the new technology. And to your point, it's not logical or rational. Somewhere in their head, they know that when they go to the competitor, they're going to have some other thing to use over there too. But it just kind of speaks to, the fear, the anxiety that they have about that change, the fear of the unknown, about what's going to be expected of them going forward. And so it sounds like you've been very proactive in trying to engage those folks in the field, which will probably be difficult to eliminate those circumstances, but certainly to reduce them to the extent possible. That's fantastic. Let's shift over a little bit to your role. We haven't really covered that yet. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, what is your role and what are the things that you're involved with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so my team consists of really the process design, change management, rolling out new business applications. What we learned over time, IT-driven projects, very, very smart people, do very good work, but sometimes they don't have the whole holistic view. And so you need somebody with more of a business background to help better understand. And so about 5 years ago, we divided our teams up between IT and BT IT focused on hardware, infrastructure, security, application development, and my team focuses on business process, roll out business applications, support of those applications, and really understanding and working with the business to try to make their life better.
That's fantastic. So, what are some of the skills? It's interesting to hear you talk about how the technology organization has been divided up a little bit. What are some of the skills that you have on your team?
So certainly have a very bright business analyst that can write good specs for the developers,
Right.
that also understand the business process, that go, okay, and and more importantly, we have so many different systems. The director of my team, understands how all those systems interplay together, and to be able to watch out for, as we bolt on through interfaces and integration, what the cause and effect and or some watch out points. So by working with the field more, there's a lot of respect built between the business transformation folks versus and the business folks, because project rollouts were there with them, were there at 4 o'clock in the morning, when we're there at midnight, and so they understand how hard we're working for them. So I think it also helps build the respect that, hey, we're all in this together. Change is hard, change is difficult, but we're trying to make your life better, and we're here working with you. We're not just dropping stuff on you.
That's a fantastic way to put it. Where's the push for that transformation coming from inside that or inside your organization today? Is it just responding to customer needs? Is it being driven by the CEO down into the organization? A combination of both? Help me understand that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's a combination of both. I mean, what's happened with the soft drink industry and most any industry, right? Consumers enjoy innovation. Consumers enjoy new products, and so SKUs have increased every year. Every year we introduce about 100 new SKUs. Some of them have different delivery methods. Being a chilled product that has to be delivered cold, and then you have just the sheer brands. And then how do people keep up with all those brands, ordering all those products? In our particular organization, we also started doing some warehouse direct shipment across the country, which that was a whole new business for us. Just understanding the fact that we need to continue to innovate and continue to expand what we're doing all the time to help meet our consumers' needs. And so because of that, that drives complexity, and you have to be willing to adapt and change. And of course, other constraints with labor, those type of issues that you see during certain periods of time. So sometimes you look at automation to help assist with some of those things, increase in safety as compliance for regulatory reasons comes about, being electronic logging or just wanting to make sure that we're doing what we can to be sure our drivers are most prepared as possible. So it really is identifying all the environmental challenges, all our consumers' needs, all our customer needs, and then again trying to meet everybody's expectation by equipping our employees with technology and process to try to meet that complexity. So it's driven, I think, through environmental factors, and of course with our senior leadership, who does a great job understanding what those environmental factors, and trying to push towards having solutions for those.
You mentioned one word a little bit ago that I think is probably bigger than the size of the word itself, which is cold, some cold products. And I'd love to explore that. I'm certainly not an expert in your distribution of your product, but the most of the balance of your product portfolio is not cold. And
Right.
so taking on cold product, does that require, in your case, does it require cold storage all the way through from DC into the customer location?
Yes, it does, with temperature monitoring throughout the process, because once it breaches 38 degrees, you no longer can deliver the product. There's certain requirements that's required by regulatory compliance, and also within internal, Pepsi wants to make sure that product is safe for our consumers. And so, yeah, there's cold storage tracking, temperature monitoring throughout the entire process till it arrives to the customer, or to our customer, but not the end consumer, of course.
Yeah, so that's a fascinating example of that convergence between, what may seem like a simple business request or business decision to say, hey, we're going to take on this cold product so that we can expand our portfolio and have more product to sell to our customers, right? That's largely driven by a business need, but
Right.
the impact to you as a technology team, and then especially your frontline workers, is profound, right? There are a lot of things to
Absolutely.
consider from a technology perspective. So are you able to share maybe some of the changes that had to be made? I know you just kind of went over some of the regulatory compliance and the need to track temperature. Can you share some of the things that you had to do or will be doing in order to be able to support that from a tech standpoint?
Yeah, we're using a older technology, and we use a gel bottles, make sure temperature and probes, et cetera, and it's constantly reading. But the problem with that is still a paper-based system, because the person actually has to write the temperature on a piece of paper as they open up with the thermometer to make sure the temperature is at the right temperature. And then all that paper's got to be shuffled back. So we're currently launching a new application, which will be on the mobile phone, and we'll work with geofencing. So the truck, when the truck arrives and departs, and what the temperature was when they arrived and departed. And then you'll have the mobile device. So instead of having to write on paper, they would just say, push the button, and all of a sudden that will be recorded that this is the temperature at that point in time. And of course, then you have a cloud-based solution. So if anybody from regulatory compliance agencies will come in going, well, here's our temperatures, everything was recorded properly, and we're good, versus shuffling paper from that day.
And were the same drivers that were delivering non-cold products before, will they now be shifting to carrying a hybrid and delivering both products?
Yeah, that's actually what happens every day. Because if you think about going to a convenience store that has Pepsi, it's also carrying our juice products. So we have to deliver that portion cold. So there's a special unit that we have to make sure it stays cold. And of course, it has the temperature there, but we can't just use ambient temperature. We actually have to use temperature of the product. Yep. So we emulate that with a bottle.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So when you think about the impact to the drivers, these guys still have to make the same number of stops, right? They don't get a reprieve and get to do 20% fewer stops per
That's
day,
right.
But they still have to figure out how to implement this new capability. And so when we talk about the change management and perhaps the reluctance to accept some of this, I imagine that's part of the burden.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they all get it. This is, a product that's not really cannibalized. There's not, a huge amount of competition in this space. If you're thinking about a C-store, right? There's only a handful of SKUs. So you want to be the person that's delivering that product. So they all understand it, but it is something else to do. There's another cooler I need to load. There's temperatures I got to track. And so hopefully with the new technology, once you're launching in June, then that will ease that burden, so they won't have to worry about the manual part of that process, and everything be automated for them.
Yeah. I love your focus on change management and just thinking about the implications of the change. I know that's a key part of your role, as you described it to us before. What piece of advice would you offer others who are looking to deploy and support technology for the front lines? Are there any lessons learned along the way that you would want to promote to others?
Yeah, I really think it's what we talked about before. It's really making them part of the process. You don't understand, all the constraints and all the pain points, and you can't just document that on paper. They really need to be engaged from the very beginning and be part of the team. And so then you also need to spend time in the field with them, because there's things they're not going to know to describe to you. But it's absolutely critical for them to be part of the process and be dedicated part of the process. In years past, we've made mistakes, or teams I've been on have made mistakes, and you have a business representative who's also doing their full-time job and being part of the project team. And that's a mistake. They need to be dedicated, waking up every single day thinking about their past life and how to apply the technology and process to make that life better for others as part of the team.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you alluded to before, which I agree with a lot, is that it's not just about the requirements as stated by the end user. So I think one phase of it is recognizing that they probably have some requirements that haven't been thought of at headquarters, that we need to go solicit that feedback as well. Some of it, I think, is the non-technical requirements around change management. I mean, I've been out in the field myself. I've gone out on routes, and I've heard drivers use terms like stress and anxiety as we're talking about the upcoming technology deployment. And when you hear the folks in the field using those terms, that's not something that shows up in a requirements document, but it's a real aspect of the success or failure of a project. And if we're not taking their feelings into account, and I don't mean to just get into the warm fuzzy stuff, but it's it's the reality that we're dealing with humans on the other side of this tech innovation. And if we don't take those things into account, we can't be successful. So
Absolutely.
it's interesting to hear how you're incorporating a lot of those things into all of the projects that you're looking at. I'm very curious to understand how you learn about new technologies, because you and I have had some interactions, outside of the podcast here, and I know that the project workload on your plate is significant right now. And I'm curious how you and the rest of your team go about learning about new technologies that you should be contemplating for the business. I know you're partnered with another larger organization, that the big brand behind your company, and I suspect some of it comes from there. But are you getting all of your innovation ideas from them, or are you also, going to conferences and learning in other ways?
Yeah, so we certainly attend a lot of conferences, a lot of research on internet. The the Pepsi bottlers and really work pretty collaboratively together. We have conferences internally and meetings internally every couple of months because we're all trying to solve the same business problems.
Right.
We look for technology that's helping like-minded or like industries, say like minded industries. Look for ones that have experience in the DSD space. It doesn't have to be another necessarily bottler, but if you talk about baked goods, or you're talking about alcohol industry, anyone where you have the kind of the same last mile logistics
Right.
directly to the store, to the consumer, you try to look for synergy around that. And we've now, after kind of implementing what I would call bleeding edge technology in some cases, we're kind of backing away, going, we want to be sure that some other bottler or some other like industries actually implemented some of this technology, so we can go touch, feel, learn from that. So we've kind of taken a little more reserved approach, let somebody else kind of go first, and then come up from behind to some degree. I mean, when we can. I mean, there's times where you have end of life issues with certain technology, so you have to go. But it's really about collaboration with other like industry. It's about attending conferences. Occasionally you get the spam email that piques your interest and goes, "Hey, I probably need to learn more about that." And then you start doing research and start engaging. So, and then of course you look for what the business problems are you're trying to solve, and Google, right?
Yeah. Do you find in your organization that the business leaders are coming to you with the requests for technology to solve business challenges that they have? Or is it more often you and your team coming to them with ideas that for things that they may not even be aware of, or things that are possible for them?
So today, I'll be very transparent. I think we're a little bit behind in some areas. Some areas we're ahead. So there's a lot more requests than us going to them. We we're trying to do a stage gate process and make sure the ROI is there, and understand what the business case for, and then prioritize accordingly, and then manage that versus all your end of life applications, and try to keep that in balance to some degree, because we never have enough resources to launch everything everybody wants.
Of course. Yeah, and you mentioned ROI in that, and that was actually one of the next things I wanted to get into just a little bit with you in terms of obviously not the specifics, but just the process that you go through when you're considering technology. Is there some time horizon over which you have to pay back a project that you are trying to deliver to your internal business customer? I'd love for you to share just a little bit about how that process works inside with your team.
So we try to justify 3 to 5 years, depending upon what it is. We right now we're so focused on just really business needs that we haven't got to the place that we're really prioritizing additional projects, just honestly. But we shoot for no more than 3 years if possible. Some things you go, okay, well, it's going to have a very long life. So even though it may be 5 years, we know the life of this business need is 10, 15, 20 years. So it's okay. But it's all about balance between end of life. 3G was a big issue for us, right? Also, and that wasn't driven by our roadmap. And that was one that was really pretty frustrating for us. We had an entire roadmap around strategy. And then when the announcement of 3G going away at the time was 2019, also we had to change our roadmap, because replacing a sales delivery device project is usually about 3 years. I was able to do it in 18 months, but it was very, very difficult, and it's worked very successfully. But that's another where we picked a technology that had been in place with a lot of other businesses like ours, so we felt comfortable we could install it optimize it later just to get it so we wouldn't have a 3G risk.
Yeah, I mean, there are at least two things that we've mentioned just since on this call that affect technology investment decisions that are really outside of your control and may not have, a pure positive ROI, and that was the technology innovation and then regulatory compliance, right? So there may be some innovation that's happening with or without your interest in it happening, like 3G. And then you mentioned with the cold storage earlier today about, some regulatory compliance about you having to track some things that, may just present a risk that's too great. So you may not see any incremental money, a technical return on that investment, other than you're meeting the regulatory compliance and you kind of have to do it.
Right.
Yeah. So when you think about the frontline workers, guys like you and me, we say things like digital transformation. We read articles that say digital transformation. What do you think the men and women in the field think when they hear digital transformation?
I imagine there's some eye rolls. Going, what does that really mean? What does it mean for me? At the end of the day, most people want to go, what's in it for me? Or, is it gonna make my life better or worse? And that's kind of the end of it. But I'm sure some of them think that not really certain probably what to think, especially when you start talking about transformation. And so I think it, as long as you're doing the right things and you're trying to make their life better, then they go, okay, I kind of get it. But imagine the first time they hear the word, it's just one of those kind of corporate ivory tower type comments, and they just go, all right, there's somebody else overpaid to do nothing.
I think you're probably right. And I think one of the other missed opportunities is something else you just said, which is the what's in it for me piece. I've never seen a deployment of technology that was designed to make the workers' lives more frustrating. Right. It may have not been optimized for an improved experience for them. I'll admit that. But in every case that I've been a part of those conversations at headquarters when the planning phase was underway, there was always some discussion about how it will make their lives easier. They're doing things on paper today. This is going to cut down time. They won't have to do so much manual work. I think the gap sometimes is how we communicate those things to those folks in the field so that they understand. By the time that part of the project comes up, it's like, hey, we've just got to roll out these new handhelds, new applications, new software, right? Whatever it is. And I think we may lose an opportunity to remind them what's in it for them in hopes that, they're more willing to deal with the change. So that's probably an opportunity for improvement, not necessarily with you and your team, but just with some of the observations that I've seen throughout the industry.
Well, I think we can always improve. There's always opportunities to better communicate and let people understand what we're trying to accomplish. And hopefully you have enough success stories going, okay, they may not be right yet, but we know the end goal and the end result, our life will be better.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the future a little bit. The phrase future of work has probably been used 1,000% or more since March of 2020. I think we've all recognized that there are some fundamental changes in how many companies will go to market. I think it's interesting, guys like you and organizations like the one that you're a part of probably have seen a very little change with the frontline workers, and that they didn't get the luxury of working from home. Your drivers and merchandisers haven't spent a lot of time on Teams and Zoom like the rest of us have. So they've had had to continue down the path that they were at before. But when you think about the future of work, if money and resources were no objects, if you didn't have those constraints around it, what's your vision for the future of what the future of work in your organization would look like?
In the DSDM space, it's about placing orders and delivering products. So I think about how do I impact, there's of course, I don't want to downplay production and everything else that's so vital for our success, but sure. My background is more around running organizations, running the warehouses, running sales, those type of things. So if I think about one of our biggest opportunities, we have over 750 SKUs, we have all these different customers, all these different points of interruption. And so the person trying to place that order in the store, has to go to the back room. He's got to fill a shelf. He or she's got to fill coolers. And so when I started, you may have one cooler, 10, 20, 30 SKUs, whatever it was. So how do we make those orders better? So some bottlers and some other companies have embarked upon suggested type of order, but it still requires inventory. It still requires putting in pricing. It still requires all these things to try to allow the algorithm to generate an order. You're also talking about huge data sets. So as I thought about this, if you think about not having to key those things, so if you think about eyewear, such as Google Glasses, etc., where as a person is merchandising the shelf, is capturing the shelf space available, is capturing what's supposed to be in that space. You're also capturing pricing because you look at the price on the shelf tag.
Yep.
You can, oh, by the way, look at what your competitor's price is. And by the way, you're aggregating your inventory and then having an algorithm point out, okay, here's what your suggested order is based upon your total inventory in the store. Here's the price point versus capturing that data manually. Now, I don't think that will probably happen in my lifetime, or at least in my career lifetime.
Right.
But if I wanted to make the user experience and give better service to our customer and to our employee, the ability to place that order instantaneously as they look and do their job and have an accurate order, that would be a utopian universe. That's for kind of the sales order. If you think about the drivers and people on the road, of course, there's more and more technology around camera technology. I serve on the North Carolina Autonomous Vehicle Committee, and the focus right now is around personal infrastructure. But as that technology improves, the ability to make sure our drivers are safer, our customers and consumers that share the road with us are safer is greater. I don't see a time where there's going to be robotics going to be able to make those deliveries, right? Somebody's got to put the product in the store. But as we can help them drive better, help them be more aware of their surroundings, that's all going to help in that area as well. And of course, robotics and automation for warehousing, that's improving daily. But if I'm thinking really long term, how do we place that order and make that person have a better order and not have to key things manually and calculate, in his head, I've got, or her head, there's 20 cases and I've got 5 here, 5 here, 5 here, that was 15. I need to order 5. I think that's where I'd like to see it go.
I want to be devil's advocate for a minute, a bit on the order placement piece. What do you think the users would say to that innovation, where perhaps some of them might say, well, what do you need me for then? If the system is just going to do all this stuff for me, right? What do you need me for? Just so I can walk around and wear Google Glasses? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's absolutely a risk. I mean, there's one of the things that could certainly come back or the other issue you'd have is going, there's no way it can place a better order, right? I know my store is better than you would ever know the store. And we have some of that today, even with people that's implementing the more manual method. So it's a huge risk. I mean, I think it'd be something that you would have to pilot and go very, very slow with to say, hey, and then also some people may go, privacy issues, right? What else is this? All these glasses recording? They're recording me in the store, so your big brother is actually watching when I'm in the store, how long I'm in the store. Privacy concerns. Do I remember taking them off when I go to the restroom? Whatever it could be. So the process would have to be well thought out. But as I was thinking about the future, how do we capture information and make it more seamless and help them create the better order? That's one thing I would like to see, but there's a lot of process and there's a lot of change management. There's a lot of thought that have to go into that.
Yeah, I think where I see the opportunity in situations like that is to let the technology take over for some of the tedious manual processes of counting how many items are on the shelf or grabbing all the prices off the shelf tags, right? We need that data, but today that might have to be gathered manually. So if we can automate those processes, and I'd love to give the human, the humans in the system, the opportunity to interact more with humans, right? And really allow their time to be focused on the store manager or the department manager inside the store, in your case, right? So that they're able to do that with more data in their hands. So we've taken out some of the tactical stuff and we've elevated their role, actually not, reduced their role. And, but again, it's to so many of the things that we've talked about just in this short time today, that requires some pretty serious change management and some education to those frontline workers to help them understand that they're not being relegated to a lower role as a result of the technology, that we're just taking some things off their plate, Yeah,
that's actually absolutely perfect and well put.
Yeah. What do you think some of the things might hold back from being able to get to that vision? I mean, some of the things that you talked about are probably technology limitations, for sure. Some things just don't exist at scale yet. But are there any other obstacles that you think that would cause you to say that you don't think it's going to happen during your career lifespan?
I really think it's just the number of data points. And when we was implementing one of our forecast solution, which we're trying to get down to each customer by SKU, it's 10 terabytes of data, and to be able to process an order, that quickly with 10 terabytes of data and feed that back to the solution, will be very preventive. You're not going to be able to do that, right? So.
Yeah.
Through the cloud. So I think that would be certainly one thing. Technology needs the processing speed, ability to things to flow through the internet. 5G, who knows with 5G, if you're in a store working, does that enable that type of speed? So I think that would be the biggest hurdle. It's just the amount of data.
We've heard that from a few companies, particularly field service organizations who oftentimes work away from where the bulk of the public go. So not to say your teams don't have connectivity issues, but most of the places that they're going because there are a lot of people there that are being served beverages, right? And other companies that we've talked to in the field service space talk a lot about their folks are outside where the public is not. Could be oil and gas and utility companies that are working on pipelines that are far away from the public, and their inability to access public networks is going to be one of the biggest constraints for them to take advantage of some of these new capabilities. So that the tech may exist when you're here, right?
Right.
In a place where, networks are pervasive, but if everything's dependent on the technology or the network connectivity at that time, then it may be prohibitive down the road.
Yeah, I think that was correct.
So let's, I'm very curious to get your background. So we've talked a lot about, the things that you're doing today and your focus on change management and business process and technology and the integration of all of those things together. I'd really love to understand how you ended up in the role that you're in today. And if we can go all the way back to your schooling, as I was reviewing your education, obviously you've placed a heavy emphasis on education in your, personal and professional development. How did you get to where you're at today?
Yeah, so I've been very blessed, and it certainly hasn't been a straight line. Not to bore you, but it really started back, and I was a high school dropout. I met my wife. We got married. Been married 40 years, and at that time in the 1980s, of course, there's a lot of mill work, and that's why I was working. Of course, mills started shutting down, and I seen the ad for Coke at the time. Well, they've been around about 90 years. They should be a pretty good safe bet. So I started on a truck and worked my way up through that, and realized after 3 or 4 or 5 promotions, I was going to be limited by my education, and so went and got my Bachelor of Science degree and continued my career pathing, and left Coke in 2000 and came to Pepsi. And at that point, when I was with Coke, I was running 5 locations. PBV had just been formed as a new organization in 1999, and they recruited me, and it was just one location, and I was bored, so I went back, got my MBA. And when I got my MBA, they said, "Hey, why don't you come to corporate where you're looking to break on some sales and analytics tools, and would like you to roll that out because you really understand what the KPIs should be." So I did that project, and then they asked me to help with a transition from, we used to sell off the truck directly and to actually a pre-sale model because SKUs were growing. And so I've done that project, and left for a couple of years. After I finished that project, left for a couple of years, went to a baking industry, and then asked to come back, and they had a need to run a division up in our northern area. So ran that for 10 years. And during that 10 years, I was that kind of business guy that always helped out on IT projects. They'd call, need kind of a SME and say, "Hey, can you help?" And our CFO said, in 2015, 2016, we really want somebody who understands the business to help IT with these solutions. And as that kind of progressed, they realized that maybe it makes sense to kind of split and let me focus. And I think that's the reason I can relate so much to the field, because I was a driver at heart.
Yeah.
So I can talk to the drivers, I can talk to people on the sales team, and most of them understand that's where I started, because I get out and roll drinks with them, and they understand I know how to use a hand truck and fill coolers, and that's just not show. So I think that gives me a unique perspective and a lot of empathy for what they go through every day. since I know where I began. And I was just very, very blessed to, when I went to for the Northern Division, things got settled, and there's a PhD program in organizational leadership, and I'm always interested in how do you make people's lives better, through technology or process, and that human element. And so their program was really focused around, unlike some PhDs, which is really focused more on academia, is focused on what they call pracademics, right? So you kind of gain the ability to do the research, but in practical application. So a little bit long-winded there, but it was kind of been not a straight road at all.
I think that's a fantastic background. I love the fact that you're a driver. I don't think that you and I have talked about that before. And I love your use of the word empathy in your current role to really describe how, you are not just figuratively able to put yourself in their shoes, but in your case, you actually were in their shoes at one time. And I think that's really powerful. I think a lot of us that are involved in technology, even those that place a high value in doing our best to understand a day in the life, we still, recognize that I've never been a delivery driver for a food and beverage organization, right? So I've been out on a bunch of routes. I've gone out and I've followed them, but I've never had to make my living that way. And so I do the best that I can do to get close to it. But I think, your background is, obviously you've got just a very intimate understanding of that. Do you feel that you still have memories that date back to when you were a driver, and are those things influencing some of the decisions that you're making today?
Oh, absolutely. Probably our most successful kind of project, meeting people where they are, was something we implemented back in 2016, 2017. In the past, we always paid people hourly. The Department of Labor says you pay overtime and pay hourly. It's a pretty simple process, right? And what I understood was, that's really not motivation to pay people on an hourly basis. The other thing that people would understand is when you have roundtables and talk to drivers, your best drivers would be upset by paying hourly, because what they would say is, I'm busting my butt. I'm getting my job done. I'm coming back on time. I'm only working, 10 hours overtime. Well, I know these other people are riding the clock, blah, blah, blah. And so we changed the pay structure to mileage. And direct correlation to that was my first route was 40 miles away from the warehouse, and I was based in commission. So I'm sitting here going, I'm driving an hour both ways and getting not earning any additional dollars. So part of the strategic plan was we pay commission, mileage, base pay, plus we pay overtime. What happened through that was the drivers ended up earning between 10 to 14% more money. Fuel usage went down. More cases were delivered, not brought back, and our total increase was less than what the merit increase was going to be that year anyway.
Absolutely a fantastic story to share. I love that example. I think that's, tracking things by hour is almost never the right way. Right. So I love that your experience there was able to influence that toward a better result. That's a great story. So if you could go back to any point in your life, would you change your course knowing what you know today? You mentioned being a high school dropout, which is that combination of being a high school dropout at one time and now having a PhD, that combination probably doesn't happen very often. But are there any things that you would do differently if you could go back and do it again?
No, I think that adds a lot of humility and understanding. It wasn't really about intellectual curiosity. It was just some personal decisions my wife and I had around our current family environment, and decided that we could do this better on our own. And we both dropped out and got GEDs and started our life. And so, I think that struggle and understanding that where your background is, and how certain decisions can impact your life one way or another. I don't think it would. There's certainly roads probably a little bit easier, but there's roads a lot more difficult. And I've just been extremely blessed. I'd have organizations that supported me, have family that supported me, and it's certainly ability to get the education needed to hopefully make me better at implementing these technologies and give me the skills I need to actually be successful.
Yeah. What's your favorite part about working in the technology space?
It really goes back down to the human element, right? Just to try to hopefully technology improves the life for the end worker, not make it more difficult, try to make it so it actually helps them and drives the business results, right? It's still, in the day, we got to drive business results or, our technology is not working for the organization as a whole. But if you can merge business needs and making the employee's life better, then it's just a huge win.
I don't have a statistic to back up my statement here, but I would bet that there are more project successes when the human element was considered versus those cases where the human element of that change wasn't considered. And there might have been fantastic ROI built into a whole bunch of spreadsheets. But if the tech is implemented without considering the impact to the humans, especially, in cases of frontline workers like this, then I'd bet a lot of money that those projects won't be as successful. And that's what I've witnessed. And I think that's why, you've achieved such great success in your career is really, placing a high priority on the impact to those individuals. And obviously it has to make sense for the business. Obviously there has to be ROI. I feel like those things are table stakes, but I think what's left out of the mix a lot is really what that human, the human interaction is going to be. And if we don't cover that, then it becomes the weakest link, and that's not fair to the men and women in the field. And then it also doesn't get the results in the business, right? So it's kind of a double whammy. Yeah, it's really good. What are some of the things that you do outside of work? I know we just spent a lot of time talking about business transformation and change management, but what happens when you're not in the office?
It's really family. I mean, that's most of the time it is. I love solving business problems, and so I spent an inordinate amount of time working and thinking about business, but family and church.
That's awesome. That's good. I actually find I have only one son at home, and he would say that I do spend a lot of time at work, but I like sharing my work experiences with my family, and I like sharing my family experiences with work. And so for me, that just kind of creates a good balance of bringing both. And it sounds like you're doing a little bit of the same there.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, very good. Well, I knew this was going to happen when we got on this call, but we're already coming up toward the end here. And I'd love to give folks an opportunity to connect with you outside this podcast. What's the best way for folks to find you if they wanted to reach out?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm certainly somewhat active on LinkedIn. Check it daily.
Okay, good. And that's Michael Langley, Langley on LinkedIn. And we'll put in your LinkedIn profile into the show notes when the podcast gets published. Okay. Well, let's wrap it up there, Michael. For the audience, I hope you found this conversation as enjoyable as I have. And if so, please share and rate the podcast. 5-star ratings help ensure that it gets promoted to other professionals like you that are innovating on the front lines. This podcast is sponsored by Skillful, the mobile digital adoption platform for deskless and frontline workers. Visit the website at skillful.com. That's SKYLLFUL.com. And if you or someone you know is out there innovating on the front lines, we'd love to hear about it. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn and share your story. And we'll see you on our next episode. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you for having me.